Started?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
And then I will minimize this. Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Laura Cheifetz, and I've been a part of PAC for a few years now. And the three of us who are hosting this are just really excited that you all were able to join us this morning. Just a few matters of, and I may repeat it as folks come online. It will ask you to hang on to your questions for the end. We're going to do sort of a panel format. And so the three of us will be talking. And then if you are worried you're going to forget your questions, either write it down with you or you can put it in the chat and then scroll back to it when you need to. But we'll have a whole Q&A section afterwards. And you can ask individual questions of each of us or questions for us as a group. And then when it comes time to ask questions, we'll just use the raise your hand function on Zoom. And if you don't mind keeping yourselves muted while the three of us are talking, that would be great. And then I'll just remind you to unmute once you do go ahead and start talking and asking questions. So welcome to Is Divinity School for You? I am going to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, and then we'll have a panel discussion on some questions that we prepared for all of you. And then we'll share a little bit about some of the specifics of each of our divinity schools, and then we'll have time for a Q&A. So that will be the format for today. So actually, I'm wondering, Todd and Margaret, if one of you would like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Todd, you go ahead.
Okay. Hi, friends. I'm Todd Maberry, and I oversee admissions and financial aid for Duke Divinity School. A little bit about my background. I grew up in Illinois, literally on a farm in a rural area, but since a calling to ministry at a young age and pursued that calling by going to school as a first-generation college student. While I was an undergrad, I was a Christian ministry major, and every single one of my classes we were reading books written by a Duke professor. So that's when I learned about Duke and learned about grad school. I had no idea that was a thing. I showed up at Duke and did my MDiv here, had a great experience. After graduating, I graduated about 15 years ago. I planted a missional house church here in Durham. I also started working at Duke in an administrative role. I was director of academic programs, and I did both for several years, and then I left and I was a pastor in Kansas City and at a large membership church in the heart of downtown Kansas City, in a dynamic environment there. And I was a pastor there for several years and didn't anticipate leaving, but had a chance to come back to Duke right at 4 years ago. So I've been in this role about 4 years. I'm ordained United Methodist, and I do this job because I'm committed to the church, and I want to be a part of equipping an entire generation of people to serve what God is doing in the world. So that's why I do what I do here at Duke.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Margaret Okada-Scheck. I am the Associate Director of Admissions at Harvard Divinity School. I have no background in religious studies or religion at all. I grew up in New York City in Queens. I am of Japanese descent. My parents were immigrants who came over in the late 60s, early 70s. And I went to SUNY Buffalo because it was the large public university of New York State, and ended up studying political science and music, things that I were really, really passionate about. And really had a long time trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I applied to grad schools, but I didn't even know that you can talk to somebody in admissions about anything about how to prepare an application. And I obviously didn't get accepted because I didn't know what I didn't know. And so as I sort of navigated my path in the world, I ended up I actually volunteered in Namibia and Southern Africa for a year, came back and worked at the Foreign Fulbright program at the Institute of International Education, but also sort of sort of wanted to have more contact with people and to support people better, because the work I was doing was much more administrative. So I then found my way to Boston and ended up actually at Harvard Divinity School and worked in graduate admissions starting in 2009. And so my training in admissions and graduate recruitment really stems from this belief that what I do is ministry. And that type of large interpretation of ministry with a lowercase m has been my way of feeling like I am serving. And so I went through Harvard. I worked at Harvard Divinity School while going to school for my graduate degree part-time. Then I went to a bunch of other institutions and then came back to Harvard Divinity School in this role. So I've been in this role for about a year now, a little more than a year. And I am really thrilled to be a part of this organization. I'm super grateful to Laura for inviting me to be here today.
Thanks to the both of you. So I'm Laura Mariko Cheifetz, and I have been at Vanderbilt Divinity School as Assistant Dean of Admissions, Vocation, and Stewardship since August 15th. I'm so fresh. And before that, I was a COO of a social justice advocacy organization working on behalf of Asian American women and girls. And before that, I was in religious publishing at Westminster John Knox Press, which is the Presbyterian publishing. And before that, I worked in theological education. So I have come full circle and I am back at it. My mom is Japanese American. My dad is white Jewish, and he converted and is now a Presbyterian pastor. My mom is also a Presbyterian pastor they're both in Alameda, California. And I'm also an ordained Presbyterian minister. So that's a little bit about me. And I am going to go ahead and move us on to our panel discussion. So I'm going to start off and talk about why theological education. So there are tons of reasons, as many reasons as there are people, as to why people go and get a theological education. Of course, there's the matter of credentialing, whether it's for further graduate study or to get the degree in education necessary to engage in various forms of ministry, whether it's chaplaincy or whether it's parish ministry. There's also that exploration of finding out what it is that different groups of people believe and exploring our own sense of belief. And then there's also formation, which is who we are becoming and how a theological education can help us become who we are called to be. Something that we talk about at Vanderbilt Divinity School, and I'm sure actually at the other divinity schools as well, is that this is not an education to give answers, it's to explore the questions. And the idea is that you would actually leave with more questions than you came in with, which, don't be afraid, you'll have the tools to explore them. And it's nice to be able to explore the why of things in community. I myself, I went to Western Washington University in Bellingham, Washington, and I was being tracked by the sociology department to get a PhD in sociology because I was good at it. But I realized that all of my independent research was not the questions of what, of description. It was the questions of why. Why white religious fundamentalism, which was like a whole series of classes I did. And so that why is actually why I ended up going into theological education, as well as like I care about humans and stuff. And the theological education can also help us become really well-versed in what makes each tradition unique. The nice thing about each of our schools is that they're not just one type of person, one type of religion, or one type of Christian. And being in that community, it helps us practice building diverse community, but it also helps clarify what some of the differences are and also what some of the similarities are without dumbing it down. And I always think about theological education as a way to explore how our joy intersects with what brings wholeness to the world. So for me, I went to a place that was really diverse because I could figure out how I, as a biracial Asian American, could be a part of ministry in a world that's not all biracial Asian Americans, or not all white people, or not all Christians. Do either of you want to add anything?
I would just want to add that religion, and this is sort of a good segue into my question, I think, but there's also a large group of folks that are interested in our schools that are really interested in larger issues of the world, whether they're wanting to make an impact in climate change or in organizational business ethics, or in wanting to serve in advocacy for immigrant rights or for refugees. And they want to use the lens of religion to make the big impact for them. So it can look very different for, and I think this goes for all of our schools, honestly, that no two students are the same. The incredible diversity of folks that are, and what they are interested in doing in the world is really wonderful. So the next question, which is to me, is what is available at a university embedded school? So, honestly, the primary benefit of attending a divinity school that is embedded in a larger university setting is that you're able to draw on the resources of an entire university. We know that the study of religion is incredibly interdisciplinary, and being able to make connections across a wide variety of fields and disciplines enables folks to be exposed to different frameworks, methodologies, epistemologies, and more. I mean, the most obvious benefit is that you're able to cross-register for classes at different schools. Duke, Vanderbilt, and Harvard the divinity schools are under the umbrella of a larger university system. So at Harvard, you'd be able to take classes, really almost up to half of your classes at all the other schools, whether it's the Faculty of Arts and Sciences or the Graduate School of Education, Harvard Law School, Harvard Business School, Harvard Kennedy School of Government. And so that ability to really draw on those sort of different frameworks is incredibly helpful for preparing each person for the kind of work that they want to engage in after they graduate. The research opportunities for those that are more interested in the academic study of religion is really fantastic because you have different centers. At Harvard Divinity School specifically, we have the Center for the Study of World Religion, but there's lots of other centers, whether it's the South Asian Institute or the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies and so on. These institutes also provide different grants and scholarships for our students to be able to take advantage of for additional funding if they want to do research, let's say in India for their field education experience or something like that. In addition, the larger universities also have really substantial access to library systems. So if you're really excited about doing research, you know, these libraries are really just such rich resources for our students and budding scholars. Harvard alone has one of the largest private library systems in the world with around 70 libraries. I would also say one of the really big benefits is building community across different disciplines, religious denominations, and across schools. So you'd be able to take advantage of student services resources at different schools. So for example, some folks that are part of the Pacific Island community also really love being a part of the Harvard University Native American program as well, which is a resource for all of our students, as well as things like the Harvard Innovation Lab if you're interested in launching a startup or a nonprofit. And I'm sure at both Vanderbilt and at Duke that they have different types of opportunities that are really unique for each of our institutions. And then I would finally say, one of the things is that I think that it is sometimes helpful to be affiliated with a larger institution. So in terms of name recognition. So so not everybody knows that Vanderbilt Divinity School or Harvard Divinity School or Duke Divinity School exists, but they certainly have heard of Vanderbilt University and Duke University and Harvard University as well. And then, and sorry, the final point I wanted to just say is that that students who are Harvard Divinity School's students become Harvard Divinity School alumni. And the students of today become alumni of tomorrow, and you have access to the entire alumni network of not just of your school, but also of the entire university, which I think is really substantial at all three of our institutions. And that I think is really a value add for all of us. Laura and Todd, do you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
I thought it was well said. I'm glad to talk about Duke, but I think we're going to have an opportunity to talk more about distinctives later on.
Yep, you covered it. So, Todd, I'm wondering if you can talk more about what people should be considering when they're looking at degree programs and which school to attend.
Yeah, so I came up with a list of the top 5 things to consider, and I'm going to list them, but they're not in any particular order. One thing to pay attention to is what are the distinctive opportunities at schools. For all schools of theology or divinity schools, there are going to be some similarities, but there's also going to be pretty marked differences, and certainly around opportunities. So pay attention to what are the distinctive opportunities. I think in just a few minutes we're going to talk in depth about each of our schools. 2, pay attention to the ethos of the school. Then, so what does the school care about, and what's the school's mission? That really matters. Where's the school at theologically? That's a great question to ask to an admissions person. A third thing to consider is the culture and the climate of the community. What's it like to be a student, and what type of community, what are the ways in which community is formed, and how does that play out? Because that is a major, that has a major impact on your education and how you're formed as a student. A fourth thing is the faculty. Faculty have also just remarkable influence on your time in theological education. If you've never done this before, when checking out schools on their websites, go to the bios of their faculty and kind of poke around and see what are the books that they've written, what's the work that they've been engaged in. At all 3 of our schools, the professors are expected to be researching and writing, so they're working on the publications that other people are using. So you'll want to pay attention to that and see if there's alignment or something to get you excited about what particular faculty members are working on. And then the 5th thing I'll say you should be considering is affordability. What are the finances around attending, and what's it going to require of you mentally, emotionally, but also financially? What type of investment are you going to need to make in order to be able to do it? I don't think it's a secret that in higher ed there's a crisis around affordability and student debt. It's something that we think a lot about at all of our schools, and asking those questions and knowing what it will cost will be important. Laura, anything to add?
I thought that was great. All right. So I'm going to move on to what do graduates of divinity schools do with their degrees. I will point out, we're going to talk about it more when we discuss each of our individual schools, but we have really distinct student bodies. So it's going to be a little bit different. I will ask Todd and Margaret to weigh in as well. So for Vanderbilt Divinity School, our folks come out, depending which degree they do, the largest chunk, 27% out of the class of 2018, did congregational ministry or worked in a denominational agency. 21% went into nonprofit leadership. 14% went into for-profit work. 11% went on to more education. 9% went into other, whatever that is. 7% went into higher education administration. 6% went to teach K through 12, and 5% went into chaplaincy. So I will say that one of the cool things about Divinity School and about these degrees is that they can prepare you for a lot of different things. They can prepare you just for like who you want to be in the world. They can prepare you for being a pastor. They can prepare you for being chaplain in the military or in a hospital setting or in a prison setting or in higher education, like a college chaplain. We also have graduates who run nonprofits, run advocacy organizations, especially here in Tennessee. There's one who is editing an online journal, a social justice journal. There's one who's running for office. There's an two alumni founded a filmmaking / marketing company, and their approach is super thoughtful. So those are the things that you can do with your degrees. I'm wondering if the two of you could also talk a little bit about what your folks end up doing.
Sure. So at Harvard Divinity School, I would agree with Laura that all three of our student bodies are distinct. And so it's great that we're all sort of sharing a little bit. I would say the categories are all the same for all three of us, right? There are definitely graduates who go on into congregational ministry or chaplaincy, nonprofit management. But I think that the numbers are a little bit different for HDS. I would say that a lot of students actually come for our Master of Theological Studies program, which is a 2-year master's degree, and it's a little bit more of it on the academic study of religion, and and so our Master of Divinity is a little bit smaller. So I would say there are more students who choose to pursue doctoral work after completing our programs, or a larger portion who have an interest in that or pursuing further degrees. But in order to become research faculty members in the academy, or to find other sort of ways to use their skills and talents from their doctoral work. I would say also nonprofit management is certainly and definitely Boston, Massachusetts, and Cambridge is a very, very rich higher ed culture. There's a lot of institutions here. So I think that a lot of folks also choose to go into higher ed administration as well through K-12. Todd?
Yeah, my colleague Margaret has it exactly right. The same categories at Duke, but they're just, the numbers are different. So at Duke, our MDiv, which is preparing people more for congregational or church ministry, is by far the largest degree that we have here. And from that degree, about 60% go on to work in a church, 10% nonprofit, 10% for the graduate studies, 10% doing chaplaincy work, and 10% the other category. So same idea, is just different numbers.
Great, thank you. So now we are going to talk about the distinctives of each of our schools. And I will be uploading this PowerPoint presentation to the Facebook event page. So if you don't write it all down, it's okay. You're going to be able to see it later. So Vanderbilt Divinity School, we have the Master of Divinity degree, which is 72 credit hours. Most people do it in 3 years if they're going full time. Master of Theological Studies is, I think it's like 48 or 42 credit hours, and that most people complete it in 2 years. And that, as Margaret said, is it can be more academic. And the Master of Theology, the THM, which is typically a degree that people do after they have the MDiv or the MTS or an MA in religious studies, and that's 30 credit hours. Most people complete it in a year. The priority deadline for the fall is January 15th, and that's how you get priority consideration for merit scholarships, although we do continue to take applications and then provide merit scholarships as available. So Vanderbilt is located in Nashville, Tennessee, which when I moved here and I started visiting churches, all the music was amazing. And it's because church musicians are often also professional musicians, or all of the, like half the people who live here and have other jobs also play music on the side. There's a lot of that. So that's really great just because of the rich history of music here. There's also this great streak in Nashville of progressive politics, which may sound funny to you, especially if you're in the West or in the Northeast. But there is Southern progressivism, and it's really active here in Nashville. And so you cannot do anything progressive in the city without running into a Vanderbilt graduate student or a graduate. We also have 10 concentrations. Every MDiv student is required to declare at least one concentration, which is a way to really focus what at other schools would be electives. And the MTS, you also have the option to do that. So you can, some of the concentrations are Black religion and culture studies, global Christianities and interreligious encounter, prison and carceral studies. We have a program with Riverbend Maximum Security Facility, which is a prison just like 25 minutes away. And one of our faculty members is kind of jointly appointed to the prison and to here. So if you're taking any of those prison and carceral studies courses, you're going to be taking them at the prison with inmates who are also students. There's religion, gender, and sexuality, spirituality, and social activism. So it's really kind of a nice way to take what you're passionate about and channel into particular coursework. We have a really diverse faculty. So we have faculty from all different Christian denominations, and there's also a couple of Jewish faculty members, and their research is all really fascinating. I would definitely recommend, like Todd said, to go and check out the faculty bios and what their research is on. The field education at Vanderbilt Divinity School is really robust. So of course you can do field education in a congregation, but you can also do it at the prison as a chaplain, or at an undergraduate institution as a chaplain, or at the hospital system down the street, or you can do it at any number of various nonprofits that are in the area. So that's a really cool opportunity. And we're one, the dean always says, we're one of 2 explicitly progressive divinity schools in the South. It's not common to have a Black lesbian ethicist, womanist dean who's respected as a scholar and an administrator. And she leads the school in its progressive ideals. We have a series of purposes and commitments that are always being drafted because, you know, things change and vocabulary gets updated. And so we're updating it right now, a team of students and faculty and staff, especially to be more cognizant of transgender and gender nonconforming and gender neutral students who are coming through. So that's something that is really cool. Additionally, we do have one staff person who is solely dedicated to helping reduce the student loan debt load. And she also, so she'll work with individual students on their financial planning to make sure that Divinity School is something that is sustainable for them, given what people are likely to earn afterwards. And then she also helps everyone finds a job. So she's always posting job listings and meeting with people to do vocational discernment, just talk through what they're exploring. And she's based out of my office, and that is a really good opportunity as well. All right, I'm going to pass it off to Duke.
Well, I like to say that the Duke is distinctive in 3 ways. One is our academics, and all 3 of these schools are schools for people who like school and want high standards when it comes to education in general, but theological education in particular. I'm clearly biased, but I think we've got one of the best collection of theological minds in all theological education. We're one of the largest. We have one of the largest faculties with more than 50 different faculty members. Right now I'm reading through recent publications of faculty members, and I just finished a book by Shi Lian, who is one of our world Christianity professors. And he wrote a book on the martyrdom of Lin Zhao, who was a young woman who grew up in China during the Maoist revolution. And she was imprisoned for being outspoken against the Maoist regime. And while she was in prison, she was writing to encourage the Christian community that she was connected with. She used her own blood to write those letters. And she was eventually executed for her outspoken beliefs. So Dr. Lian wrote basically the seminal and the only work on this martyr of the church. And That's just one example of one faculty member doing kind of groundbreaking theological work. So in addition to academics, we also, another distinctive is we care deeply about the church, and we want to form people for faithful Christian ministry. We want to infuse people with an imagination for congregations. We see the church as a solution, and we're well aware that the church has its problems and is in deep need of critique, but it's also the way God chooses to work in the world. So we want to form leaders who see the church as vital to a thriving community and can be a part of a network and could be a part of a community in ways that give life and allow for human flourishing. So those are two of our main distinctives, the academics and the concern for the church. More than half of our faculty are ordained, and most of us working here see the work that we're doing through the lens of vocation. The third, and I think the true distinctive then, is that we're a part of Duke. We're right in the center of campus, right in the middle of an incredible R1 research university. That matters for so many different ways. We've already talked about how you can take classes at the other schools. We have deep relationships with the other schools. So we have an initiative in theology, medicine, and culture where 4 of our faculty have appointments here and at the medical school, which is just right out my window. I can see Duke Medical Center right out the back here. And so some of the only conversations in theological education happening around the intersection of theology and medicine, and how do you care for someone as a human being? How do you treat mental illness as a community? How can the church impact the opioid crisis is happening here. We have an initiative in theology and the arts, which is the intersection of the artistic community here at Duke and the School of Divinity and other schools as well. We've talked about the benefits of being a part of a university. At a place like Duke, basketball really matters here. It's a big deal. And if you've ever seen a Duke game on TV, people paint themselves and jump around like crazy. Divinity students, when you see that, you're seeing Divinity students on the court. When you watch those games, if you don't care about sports, there's 10 libraries right here on campus, and you can go to all of them. There's $24 million art museum and just countless opportunities. In preparation for this time, I reached out to Angie Hong. She's a current student here and has also, I think, been active in this group. And I asked her what she would want me to convey as distinctive at Duke. And she mentioned innovative thinking around Asian American theology. We've been offering an Asian American theology class where she says that we're starting from a systematic and anthropological viewpoint, incorporating philosophy to adjust the lenses, and then reviewing current literature and trying to make progress in this emerging field. There's an active Asian theology group. I don't want to give there's not like a giant cohort of Asian American students here. Asian students make up about 4 or 5% of our student body, but there is a really active Asian theology group where they bring in guest speakers like Dr. Grace Kim. They just had what they called a pack look at the home of our vice dean for academic affairs, who's Korean American, Sujin Pak, to get to know one another. She said that it's important to pass along that there's an H Mart that's 30 minutes away, and that there are good restaurants, but they're 30 minutes away in Morrisville, Cary, and Raleigh. So it's important that Duke is in Durham, which is a part of a larger triangle region of Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. And then the final thing she mentioned is just a roster of important alumni, including Dr. Jonathan Tran, Dr. Jess Wong, Gail Song Bantam, Brian Bantam, Michael McBride, and Dr. Shanique Walker Barnes. So there's some of the distinctives about Duke.
All right, Harvard.
Hi, everyone. Great. So thanks so much for, again, giving me the opportunity to chat a little bit about my school. So Harvard Divinity School and Harvard University is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So I guess I'm the only school here that represents the Northeast United States. I think that what makes HDS particularly unique, especially among most of the other divinity schools, is that we are the most religiously pluralistic divinity school in the United States. We have over 36 religious traditions represented. So if you feel like you want to be surrounded by people who are of similar faith traditions, then HDS would not be a good fit for you. But if you are interested or want to be surrounded by folks of other faith traditions, whether they're Muslims and Jews and Sikhs and people who have no faith tradition at all, or people who have multiple different types of faith traditions you may never have heard of, then HDS actually may be a great place for you. We find that being in such a diverse, a religiously diverse and diverse in general place really creates an incredibly rich and dynamic learning environment. And so you are going to be pushed in your assumptions and your faith traditions, and even folks who, you might take a Christian theology class, but there's absolutely no assumption that anybody in that class is either a Christian or has any foundation in that yet. Because folks are really coming from a wide variety of different types of backgrounds. Another thing that is that, as I said earlier, HDS is embedded in the larger Harvard University system. So not only are students at our school able to draw on resources, academic and social resources, but they are also able to connect with other folks. And I would say that, the Asian American community is small at HDS, but people are able to build community in other ways that I think is really vital and important. I will also say that Boston, so I'm from New York City, so it's kind of, I have a skewed vision of like what sort of being surrounded by a lot more people, I think, who look like me, but Boston Cambridge does have a really sizable college student population and graduate student population. So we're down the street from MIT as well as Boston University, Boston College. So there's loads of different communities to be a part of, and there is an H Mart one subway stop away, and lots of really good food. And I'm able to get all the things that I need really close by. So for when I cook or have parties or whatever. In terms of our degree programs, the two primary ones that we offer in the master's level are the Master of Divinity and the Master of Theological Studies. At HDS, as Todd sort of mentioned, like the MTS is much bigger. This is a 2-year degree program that's specifically primarily about the academic study of religion, but it's also for folks that are just really interested in using the religion as a lens to do the kind of work they want to do. We've recently gotten more mid-career or second or third career folks who are interested in our school. So if you're not just straight from undergrad, but other folks that are all across the adult lifespan, and who are really interested in using this either to change their career or to actually really have a different sort of perspective on the work they've been doing. So lawyers or doctors or people who work in government or journalists have been attending our school more frequently in order to feel better equipped to do the work they want to do. Our Master of Divinity program is our ministerial preparation, but at HDS, it's a lowercase m. And that means that there is no specific denomination that we are rooted in. And only 30% of our MDiv students are actually interested in congregational ministry. Rather, the other 70% are doing loads of different things, whether it's lay ministry, whether it's working in nonprofits, whether it's working in the arts or in working as writers. These are all different ways that people are able to interpret the degrees and use them to equip themselves with the right tools and skills they need to do the work they want to do. Our Master of Theology program is a 1-year degree program at the master's level, usually for folks who have already have a master's already. And then the PhD is a really straightforward research doctoral program in religion. So I just wanted to say our deadlines are there, and if anybody has any questions, please do feel free to reach out.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So I will put this screen up again later, but right now I'm going to stop the share so we can have the Q&A portion. All right. So if you have a question, if you could raise your hand on the Zoom, raise your hand thing. Does that make sense?
Oh, what is that?
I do see Jackie actually raising
Yeah.
her hand. Okay, go for it.
I think I'll plunge first. So I had a question about most of you said that your students, maybe 50%, go into nonprofit management and leadership after they finish their degree. I just had a question as to if you've had students who are already in leadership positions, working and attending school, and how that has worked out. I guess my background, I'm already a director at a Christian nonprofit, and so I wanted to use the divinity degree to amplify that. But I just wanted to know if there are other students that you've seen that have done that.
Did you direct that at a specific person? Sorry.
No, that was just a general question to everyone.
Yeah. So my guess is that this is common among the 3 schools, but for sure there are people who are already in nonprofit leadership. We have a couple of folks who are coming part-time to do the MDiv or the MTS, and then other folks who've worked it out with their organization. And then we have some folks who actually, they are older and they are done for the moment with nonprofit leadership, like they've passed off leadership to someone else, and then they're coming to div school, and they will then probably go back into it afterwards. Is that accurate for the 2 of you as well?
Yeah, and something different that I can add. Yeah, we do have students that are in nonprofit come to Duke and either lead that role. If you do our more traditional programs that are residential, the Master of Divinity, Master of Theological Studies, that looks like leaving wherever you are and coming to Durham. We also do have a hybrid MA program for people who are currently working and want theological education, where you only come to Duke 3 times a year, and then it's online live education. And that's a good mix of people working in churches, some nonprofits. This past year we had 4 lawyers, 2 police officers, a federal judge, and a mortician join as well. So that would be something different maybe that I could offer.
Okay.
And just from Harvard Divinity School standpoint, I just want to say that unfortunately, like all of our programs are full-time, full residential. So folks that are in positions like yours often will leave their jobs and make and recognize this is an investment in themselves, and in, you know, either really engaging in the work. But I recognize that's not a format for everybody.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chloe. Remember to unmute yourself. Okay, I think Chloe is putting the question in the chat. What does discernment for seminary / ministry, pastoral or otherwise, look like as a PAC? So at Vanderbilt, there are denominational liaisons. We're not affiliated with any one denomination. And so there's like Episcopalians and Lutherans and lots of non-affiliated. They also have a denominational liaison, Presbyterians and Methodists. And so those groups gather monthly to talk about discernment and what what people are going through in their process, if they're going through ordination process. And so for PAC members, it's gonna honestly depend on you, because a lot of this is gonna be self-driven because it is a graduate degree. It's how much active work you wanna do. If you're fully engaging in Divinity School, you're gonna end up doing discernment no matter what. And it's gonna involve your personhood, right? Like yourself, your incarnation, your own relationship with your spirituality and with your background and with your racial identity and your gender identity and your sexual orientation in reflection with the canon and the stuff outside the canon, which happens a lot here. We've changed the canon maybe, with beliefs, with doctrine, with all of the things that you're learning in biblical studies, and what you're learning about Christian history. And so the first year, it might feel a little bit rough. So the discernment is going to be like unpacking a lot of what you were taught or what we all learn when we're just like surrounded in a kind of Christianist culture, and then reconstructing what it is you believe and who you are, if that helps. I am going to call on Gloria. Remember to unmute.
Hi, I'm currently enrolled in a seminary school, But I was wondering if I was interested in taking a class at another school, like maybe one of your schools. Do you know if that would be a possibility? Or
So it depends what school you're at and what where each of us, like what our systems are. There are people, we call them like non-degree folks, and so people who are, you know what, I would have to ask if you wanted it for credit at Vanderbilt. I would have to ask. It's definitely like people enroll in our classes just as one-offs. Sometimes they audit.
So the only way to cross-register at Harvard Divinity School is if you're a member of one of the affiliated institutions with the Boston Theological Institute, or if you are sort of apply as a sort of special student, which is to take it for credit. Auditing is a sort of different process. So it sort of depends. Also, I don't know where you're physically located. And so that might also impact things because we don't offer online classes.
Yeah, so actually, Gloria, if you wouldn't mind emailing me or all of us, then we can get you more specifics on that based on your situation. Does that work?
yeah, thank you.
Awesome. All right, I see Albie.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So I completed a program in counseling at a seminary here in Seattle. And I don't know why I'm here. I think I'm just here to kind of hang out and just talk about theological education. And because I'm still in that like reconstruction phase, which is very difficult, I would say. And that would be my advice to everyone, that your initial comments, Laura, about like asking more questions rather than having answers at the end of the education. I think for me, one of the questions I have as I maybe will consider doing a second degree is the affordability question. Theological education doesn't make a lot of financial sense, even as you're talking about like the fields that people go into, nonprofit, like ministry. The economics of it don't really make a lot of sense. So you kind of have to be going in for the calling. Do you guys, I know that all three of your schools probably have a pretty large endowment. And how much of that endowment is actually funneled towards aiding students in particular?
Todd, you want to start?
Yeah, so we are fortunate that we have an endowment. In terms of schools, like we were kind of late to the game, actually. We started our endowment in the 60s. Personally, I find myself like chasing behind Princeton, who started their endowment in the 1890s, and have a lot of resources. We have a lot of resources at Duke. We provide scholarship support for every student that we admit. I've talked a little bit about our identity, because we care so deeply about the church and the MDiv, like that's where a lot of our resources reside. And the MDiv can be affordable if you're willing to engage in ministry. We've mentioned that I think all of us require some type of internship experience at Duke. It's required, and you're also paid to do it, and it's paid pretty well. It's about $9,000 to $10,000 per placement. So it's possible to come to Duke and get some scholarship support, do the field eds, and come out. And I've noticed our Asian American students here are, I'd say, highly sensitive to price, and I'd say I can say objectively they're the most financially responsible out of all our students. If you look at our debt loads by race and ethnicity, Asian Americans are clearly have the lowest debt loads here at Duke.
Laura, I'm happy to go if you want me to.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I actually think this is a really wonderful question, so thank you so much for asking it. So Harvard Divinity School has a pretty large endowment. I would say it draws from Harvard University's endowment, which is pretty big and pretty old. That being said, we have very generous financial aid, but you're right that there is a cost to attending graduate school, and there's always things that you don't think about. And I really want to be transparent. We offer HDS's packages are actually really strong, I would say. We offer a small portion of merit aid, which is full tuition and a stipend, and for folks, and nobody has to apply for it. It's just based on the strength of the application. But the vast majority of our aid actually goes to need-based aid. So that is based on the individual applicant as they are applying. Admissions decisions are completely separate from financial aid, so nobody looks at anybody's finances when making admissions decisions. And our need-based packages, of which I would say 80 to 90% of our students get some type of financial aid from us. And for the need-based package, the bottom level is 3/4 tuition to full tuition with a stipend. We try to be really generous. That being said, Nashville, Tennessee, and Durham, North Carolina is cheaper than Cambridge, Massachusetts. That is a fact. If you are in Seattle, Washington, you sort of know, like, we're in more expensive regions of the country then. So the cost of living is also something that everybody has to really take into account. And wanting people to really do their research. That being said, there is also the idea of, it sometimes can be really hard for folks that go into caregiving or caring professions, like often the folks that are interested in divinity schools end up winding into. And I also think that there is a case to be made about investing in yourself, to create that larger impact on the communities that you are going to make a difference on, and so that's the other thing you have to also weigh. That each one of our institutions will provide you with phenomenal education to do the work you want to do. And so it's weighing that against the sort of the fiscal responsibility of it, which I know is really hard to do. Laura?
Yeah, at Vanderbilt, 100% of the students who come full-time have some level of merit aid. We do all merit. The lowest is 25%. The highest is 100% tuition with a stipend, and median is 75% of tuition. Because there has been a lot of concern in the industry about student debt loads and what people are able to pay back later, that staff person I mentioned is part of an initiative across the board, across the ecology, basically, of trying to lower student debt loads. And our student debt loads have gone down, just because even if people don't get the full aid, there's still access to a lot of different resources, whether they're external scholarships or whether it's figuring out how to be really strategic with loan funds to get the kind of education that you need to do what you want to do. And I am sorry, I do not know the amount of the endowment that actually goes towards merit scholarships. I know we are heavily endowed, and we try to give out as much of it as we can. And that's, we're also apparently starting some kind of capital campaign down the road to raise more scholarship funds. So. And I saw that Stacy has a hand up. Remember to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Some reason my camera went away. So I have a question. Thank you for your time today. So I already have a master's degree. It's an MBA and with a nonprofit concentration, and I can't wrap my head around paying for another master's degree. Is there any doctorate degree that you don't have to have the Divinity School seminary master's, but you can move into doctorate, or not really?
At Vanderbilt, we do have a PhD. I just don't handle PhD admissions. And also it's like, they won't admit anyone unless there's full funding plus a stipend. So it's super, super selective. My understanding is that they do require some kind of master's degree that's pertinent to the area of study. And we do have a lot of folks that have a master's degree already, whether it's like an MPA or an MBA, who do come and do the MTS or the MDiv. The nice thing about Vanderbilt is that we don't discriminate between the MTS and the MDiv when we're giving out aid. So we'll give merit to the people doing the 2-year degree as well as the 3-year degree. And as someone who has an MBA also, the support for Divinity School degrees is more than people who get MBAs, right? Because business school, you're expected that like you'll be able to pay for it. So it's a slightly different situation. Todd or Margaret, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, Laura, thanks so much for saying that. I agree. There's the PhD at Harvard is entirely a research-based PhD. So folks really have had generally graduate degrees that have provided them with the academic preparation to do like academic research in that field. However, in the Master of Theological Studies or the Master of Divinity, there are loads of folks with multiple master's degrees because lives are really long and journeys are varied, right? And we all try to make the best decisions throughout our lives as we can. Todd, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I'll just add that, Stacey, if you're looking at an elite theological school like one of ours, you certainly could apply. I would think you'd have very little chance of receiving an offer of admission. There is some level of theological elitism when it comes to doctoral work in these fields that you have to have a master's and have that foundation in order to jump into the doctorate level. We also have a Doctor of Ministry program that's slightly different than a THD or a PhD, but even that requires a master's level graduate theological degree.
Thank you.
I did see in the chat that someone asked about H-Mart in Nashville. Here's the deal, because I'm trying not to be bitter. There is no H-Mart in Nashville. They tried to put an H-Mart in, and all of the small Asian grocery business owners banded together and opposed it. So you're welcome. We support small business.
As long as you can get what you need, right?
Yeah. And actually, I used to live in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm going to say that the whole like ethnic grocery restaurant scene is hella good in Nashville compared to Louisville.
I also lived in Nashville for 7 years. Hi, everyone. I just joined. I'm a little late. I got crossed with the time zone difference. But yeah, like I lived there for 7 years, and the restaurants are really, really bad. But I pretty much got like 80% of what I needed grocery wise from K&S World Market, which there are 2 locations of. You just have to kind of learn to make food yourself because you can't go to a restaurant and get anything decent.
There's one good Thai place. But if you want to, support isolated Asian business owners, go for it. Also, I'm here, so come hang out. Anyone else have a question? I think Gloria does.
Hi again. I was wondering if you could speak about if you know of students pursuing music ministry. That's what I want to do. I don't really know if I want to do like pastoral ministry, but I want to do music ministry. So just wondering if you have any advice or like seeing students doing that at your schools.
Yes, we do have sorry, I'm looking at the list, a religion and the arts concentration that would potentially include that. One of the primary professors in that concentration is a musician. She was looking really stressed on Thursday because she had to like relearn an organ piece on Bach for Sunday. Anyway, so of course she's a good Episcopalian. And so you would also be able to take up to, I'm trying to remember how many credits, depending on the degree, you can take a certain number of credits at any of the other graduate and professional schools. And one of the schools is the Blair School of Music. So yes, I imagine you could absolutely do that. You can also set up reading courses with individual faculty members for your electives, or to fit into your concentration. So it could be that if you wanted to work with that one professor, for instance, who is in music ministry, that you could put together a course where you do some readings and the two of you have some discussion and you write a project. So that's definitely a possibility. Todd and Margaret?
I'll say absolutely at Duke. We have an initiative in theology and the arts where you could explore that intersection. Jeremy Begbie is kind of like one of the leading voices at that intersection of art and theology. There's also Lester Ruth, who is the authority, or he's the guy who is studying the history of contemporary Christian worship, which makes no sense if you think about it, but he's doing that. And what he's done is he's drawn a cohort of people who are working on songwriting and creating liturgy and worship. And so there's doctoral students and master's level students who are in this robust community that are working on that. If you're interested in learning more, Gloria, about Duke, I'd love to connect with Angie Hong. She was a worship leader in Chicago before coming to Duke, and she's pretty active in a lot of different ways here at the Duke community. So I'd be happy to connect you with her.
Yeah, so in terms of, for Harvard Divinity School, I would say music ministry is not a strength. I think that lots of folks might be more interested in Yale Divinity School because they do have that Institute of Sacred Music. Students who are interested in music ministry, I think they are able to draw upon different sort of organizations on campus, being involved, and there are certainly folks that can do field education in those areas. But unfortunately, I don't think it's not like a real significant concentration. I think broadly in the arts, absolutely, we have folks that are filmmakers and dancers and artists and writers, painters, all sorts of folks that certainly are involved. But I would say a focus in sacred music or music ministry is not as strong.
Thank
And
you.
then last question, just so we can respect everyone's time, Albert.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, since you guys are talking to the Progressive Asian American Christian group, what makes your schools progressive, and how would it be hospitable for someone that does identify as a PAC? I just hear a lot, and having gone through my own kind of seminary program, it's very white and heteronormative and all these other things. How open are your schools to engaging in the discourse that we're engaging in online?
So I will start. This place is so gay. When I came, I was like, I knew the dean, right? She's been out for freaking ever, and like really progressive. And then I knew that the prior academic dean was a lesbian. And then I was like, oh, so is this new academic dean? And then it turns out one of the other deans is a gay man. Okay. And then it turns out one of the field ed directors is a lesbian. So anyway, also, there's faculty members also who are queer, and not everyone is white. So I think that really helps in terms of like the intersectional queer dialogue. People are really aware. Oh, and then there's me, right? But then like when the new extension, we just put a new extension on the building. I have an office in the new like remodeled part. The new restrooms that went in are all single stall, gender neutral, and all gender restrooms, just because we couldn't make a lot of substantive changes to the other restrooms that were already there, but we wanted to really make it clear to people that we're aware that there are lots of different ways that people identify, and really respect that in a theological institution. Something that also makes us progressive is, I'm going to tell you a little story. So I don't know if you've heard of Sally McFaig, but she was like a leading theologian, and this part is embarrassing, was interim dean of the faculty, not as a tenured faculty person in the 70s, but as a faculty spouse, so the patriarchy. And when there was a lot of resistance to apartheid in South Africa, the Divinity School went against Vanderbilt University and declared opposition to apartheid South Africa. And the university got mad, and she took the fall for it and resigned to protect the faculty. Also, Vanderbilt Divinity School used to be affiliated with the United Methodist Church, and in the early 1900s cut off that affiliation because the bishops were getting too hands-on with faculty appointments and staff issues. So there's kind of a long streak of being rebels. Like if there is a protest somewhere, there will be Divinity School students there. There was a wage theft problem with the construction of this new building, and the students found out about it. And so the dean went to a meeting, because she didn't know about it, with the students and the affected parties. It was a subcontractor didn't pay another subcontractor. And to be clear, the Divinity School does not handle these contracts. That's the university. And then she just went to the provost, was like, we have to pay this. And the provost was like, yeah, we have to like make it happen. So they pressured the subcontractor to pay the other subcontractors, because the other subcontractors, one was white owned and one was Latino owned and had a lot of undocumented workers. So that's just like a really consistent theme. We also have one of the highest ratios in a predominantly white institution of Black faculty members. And there's like a religion and gender program. So we're pretty well versed. We were having this whole conversation with one of the faculty members at a lunch about how she should get a Showtime subscription so the rest of us could mooch off of her and watch the reboot of the L Word, so then we can have our sex positive, race critical, feminist, queer conversation about it. And it's something that almost everyone has to be well versed in. There are only 2 Asian American faculty members here. And I did have a conversation with someone. I was like, where are all the Koreans? I'm missing, like there's no Chuseok here happening. There's no celebration. And someone had said, well, because we're so progressive, sometimes it's harder for people to get approval from communities to come, which I don't know if I buy, because Hanshin University and Hanshin Seminary. So the community is not as big, but we definitely have it going on in the progressive end. Someone else?
Albert, I'm glad you asked that question, and I was hoping to bring it up at some point. Duke is, if you're coming from a progressive place, Duke is going to feel really conservative to you. And if you're coming from a conservative place, Duke is going to feel really liberal to you. And that's, I think, one of our strengths. That's also one of our weaknesses. I think we've got pretty remarkable theological diversity here, where people are on a pretty broad spectrum. And coming to Duke means you want to be challenged, and you're going to be in a classroom with someone that is going to think theologically very different from you. It's no secret that Duke's been in the news for things that have blown up, and I'm happy to talk about that. I'm not going to take up time to explain and talk through all that, but just know I'd be glad to have a conversation about that. In terms of like our identity, it's a predominantly white institution. We're about 2/3 people who identify as white and 1/3 of people who identify as other. We have the largest cohort of Black or African American students in all of Duke. I'm here at the Divinity School. We've got the oldest Office of Black Church Studies. We require all of our students to take a Black Church Studies class. We're about 50-50 male-female. We have 55 different denominations of the Christian tradition represented here. And we do have a significant but small cohort of students who identify with marginalized sexual orientations. But we're affiliated with the United Methodist Church. I don't know how much you know about that, Albert, but it's a dumpster fire right now around issues of human sexuality. And that's playing out in real time here at Duke. So Duke is a beautiful place. It's a place where you can find deep community, incredible opportunities. It's not perfect.
Yeah, I would say that Harvard Divinity School is definitely a very progressive place. I would say that generally speaking, conservative voices would be the minority in our classrooms and in among the student body, among but it is predominantly white. I am, you know, even as a staff member, there's not that many people that look like me. So I would say about a quarter of our students a quarter of our domestic students identify as students of color, and then we've got another quarter who are like international or considered. I would say, however, that being said, the cool thing about HGS is that we are the queerest school at Harvard, without a doubt. I would say folks that identify as queer or LGBTQIA is really, really felt and present on campus. It is a very, very affirming place. My colleague, who's the Assistant Dean of Student Life, is a trans man. They are a fantastic individual who has really created an environment that's incredibly affirming and inclusive. We have a lot of gender neutral restrooms on campus. We've had them for a while. And I think that our values for the community around inclusion and belonging is definitely just still a work in progress. We are the oldest institution in the United States, and you know, it is not lost on me that was built on the slaves of stealing from Native folks for people who have, you know, we have a very, very heavy history that we are descendants from, or we have the responsibility for. And so I'm happy to chat about this more. But I would say that it is a work in progress, but there's loads of also progressive and wonderful sort of highlights as well. Does that answer it, Albert?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult question to answer in 2 minutes. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to thank everyone for your time and thanks for your patience. We went over a little bit on time, but I feel like it was a pretty good discussion. So I'm going to post our email addresses in the event, and I'm going to try and figure out how to upload that file. And then I will make sure that we have a way to follow up. I did figure out how to export the guest list from the Facebook event so that maybe we can send them a link to this recording. So thanks, PAC.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Thanks, Laura, for organizing.
And doing the work of